Hello, and welcome to Decorating Pages. I'm your host, Kim Wannop. Look at this again. I'm here. Second time this week again. I told you we are backed up with 4-year considerations for Emmys and SDSA awards. It's back to back over here. I know you enjoyed Andor. I know you enjoyed listening to set decorator Rebecca Alloway. Because it shows in the numbers. So I'm glad that everybody enjoyed that. And obviously, I got another great one here for you. If you are a fan of Yellowjackets, the production designer Margot Ready for season 3, the amazing work that they did. And here's a little something that I didn't know. They didn't even build any of that outdoor set indoors. They built all of it outdoors and just went with it. I mean, think about that. Like a rainy day. Oh, we're still shooting. So we get into a lot of that in this interview. So I know you're going to enjoy that. Speaking of, let's just talk about how many 4-year considerations we have going on here. Way back when the Art Directors Guild Awards were around, we still have some FYCs for TV back then. Don't forget about the Penguin, because I won't. The Penguin is fantastic. Penguin Andor. I don't know. That's a tough race. But Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez stories, that's in contention. Daredevil. Let's not forget Man on the Inside for half hour. How could you forget that sweet little show? I don't even, Ian Phillips, Kim Wannop. I mean, what a duo. And then the other one, Dr. Odyssey for contemporary. Come on, that ship was fantastic. I'm just gonna, why not? I'm gonna toot my own little boat horn here. Dr. Odyssey looked fantastic. Very hard to get any recognition on network. I know that, but you can change that. I'm gonna lecture you in a second. The Bondsman, Primeval, you had Andor, today's Yellowjackets. You got Hacks, Matlock, Dexter, Mid-Century Modern. I still have Severance coming up. Still Severance. So many things to help you make your decision. But let's just think about voting for a second. And let's vote on the work and not your friends. Okay? I know we're all friends. I know that we want people to have a good time. But sometimes really at least look at everyone's work, because sometimes you'd be surprised. You check out a show and the design and everything and you think, wow, I don't watch that show, but hot damn, that design is something. So just give it a chance. If you're an Emmy member on your dashboard in FYC, you have access to all of these programs to even check out just one episode. So, voting for Emmys is June 12th through the 23rd. The SDSA starts May 30th and ends June 5th. So if you are an SDSA member, Set Decorator Society of America, they will email you your ballot. And yes, I am on there. I should be. For A Man on the Inside for half hour and Dr. Odyssey for contemporary 1 hour. There you go. I'm not being too proud to beg for a little look. Just look at the work. There you go. What else am I watching? I've been really watching a lot of what I have to watch for this podcast, which is fantastic television. But also, The Last of Us. I can't not knock it. But you know what I will knock? There's only 7 episodes in this season, and I think that's kind of bullshit, because they've all knocked down, like Man on the Inside's only 8 episodes. A lot of half-hour Netflix shows are going down to like 8 episodes, but HBO doing a 7-episode season is a real slap in the face. At least give me 8, 10, 7. I don't know where to begin with that. So kind of mad that I only have 1 episode left of The Last of Us, and I waited so long. Set decorators Lisa Lancaster and Jonathan Lancaster are doing a phenomenal job on that show, I must say. You can also listen to them on this podcast for last year's Shogun. Yeah, they did that too. I'm missing Righteous Gemstones already. I wish it didn't end. But I am filling my time with Your Friends and Neighbors. Finish that off on Apple. What a beautiful looking show that is. And the studio, hoping to talk to Julie and get her some love. The studio is behind the scenes Hollywood, and the sets are fantastic. So that's what I've been watching lately, and really diving into all of these other shows. I'll tell you what, probably would not have watched Mid Century Modern, which is a half-hour comedy multicam with Nathan Lane. And I mean, everyone in there is really good. Linda Lavin was on it and she passed away. The design is fantastic. And I'm glad that I checked it out. Now it's a contender for my vote, you know? Axe, Matlock, Dexter. I mean, there's a lot to think about this year. There's a lot of great design, as in every year, but really, I hope that the podcast helps you make a decision or two. But don't forget, I have all this on YouTube and I have all the clips on Instagram and TikTok. It's kind of hard to see on those though. If you go to YouTube and really look at like when someone's talking about a set, you can fast forward in the interview and just look at what we're talking about. If you don't want to watch the whole series, I've condensed everything for you. I'm doing a lot of work over here for you. And your votes. No, I'm kidding. Well, you could certainly watch the Dr. Odyssey and the Man on the Inside videos too and make up your own mind. There you go. But let's get to this one. I am excited because Yellowjackets is kind of a sleeper. I feel like not everybody watches it. It's kind of underground, but it's good. It's really good. So today for Yellowjackets season 3, I talked to production designer Margot Ready, and we get into some wild, pun intended, literally, talking about how her team built a fully functioning village in Vancouver wilderness using only natural materials, like sticks and salvaged plane parts. And I mean, everything is, we dive into what you could actually use and is it realistic, and it is. Margot also talks about the handmade architecture book that they made to surprise that they used themselves, of like how would they know how to make these structures. So they made a little architecture book for their age group in high school, and they kind of went off of that. And I think that that's a tremendous design element for anyone who's looking for something of realism to put into your show, like, you know, that we all do. Like, for me, I always think like, well, where do they shop? And they did a architecture book. And there was paper craft lanterns, which I didn't know what they were made of. We'll get into that. I'm gonna tease that. So if you are curious about the show and how they got it all done, and like I said, they shot it almost all outside. That's crazy. So I hope you enjoy.
Yeah. Another dimension, like still having its own realism and its sense of, you know, artistic kind of cohesiveness is a really fun goal for these projects too.
Were you on the show from the beginning?
No, I joined in season 2.
Season 2, yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't know if maybe you came in a little season 1 or not, but
yeah,
I love this show. I'm a fan of this show, so it's extra special to me when I talk to people who I'm a fan of the shows because I dork out a little. So sorry about that, but
oh, totally understand. I was a fan of the show when I got hired, which was just the most fabulous feeling.
yeah,
And
oh yeah,
I also mentioned that as well. They were already fans of the show, and then they got brought on. And there's a kind of pinching yourself that goes on for a few months until you're like, am I actually
yeah,
standing in the set? And we're
yeah.
changing. We're doing, you know, the cabin on stage and all of that. So it's a really wonderful feeling.
Two, you get to because I think too, I know what's happening. I know what the scripts are. I know what the story is. Like, oh my god,
Like, oh, I remember that. And you
yeah.
weren't there, but you're like, "Yep, I remember that part."
Yeah, it's like when you're a fan of the show you work on, it's a different level.
Mhm.
I mean, I think, we work and some projects are more to our hearts than others, but it's great when you work on something you really like, I must say.
Mhm. Very fortunate.
When you came into season 3, how long was your hiatus from season 2? Let me put this
It
back
was
here.
quite long, due to the strikes. It was longer than it was intended to be. So we stopped shooting season 2 in early February of 2023, and then we came back in March of 2024
Oh,
for
wow.
season 3. So it was over a year, and that is, of course, about 6 months, I believe, was added to that gap
Wow.
due to the strikes in Hollywood. In a way, it was, sometimes there's a fortuitousness to the timing, in the sense that we were able to shoot summer for summer, and we shot outside,
Oh, nice.
for the village and all the wilderness beats. So the timing in that sense worked out well, and we had amazing weather. We were very lucky
Oh,
last summer.
nice.
The weather was clear and perfect and not too hot.
Oh, nice.
But in that sense, of course, we were all happy to be back, but also we did benefit from the summer for summer component of it.
Did you did you set out so you set out to design this and shoot this all outdoors, or was there talk of like we should make two of these? We should make one outside and one on a set.
You know, it's interesting. That's a good point. And we have like a bravery on the part of our production and our DPs, because the initial talk was to do sort of what you would expect, which is you're going to build an exterior for the village outdoors, and you're going to build some, huts on stage. So we were prepared for that, and that we didn't end up doing it. The discussion ultimately became with the DPs and our really brave and fabulous showrunners and so on, saying, let's just go for real. If it's raining, we're going to figure it out. So there was a lot of exploration in our process. We decided to build everything outside for real. The village was built out of real sticks and real leaves. There's no fake materials to speak of.
Wow.
And then also the pit, which was an amazing
Oh, yeah.
exploration as well. Frequently when you have a big pit like that and you're in Vancouver and you think, okay, it's going to fill up with water, getting down into it's going to be tricky to film it. It was such a big part of the season, with Coach's discovery of it and
Yeah.
Travis's kind of exploration with the weaving the twigs and so on. We ultimately decided just to cut it in the ground, which just think was the best choice, because we built a proper pit in the ground that could get in and shoot,
Oh, wow.
and we had to get a sump pump and all kinds of technical
Sure.
engineering to do it, but it was really the way to go. So we just went for it and pulled off the band-aid, and we didn't film much on stage of the 90s timeline.
Mm.
Most of it was in the real wilderness.
Did you have inspiration for these huts, but then had to change your approach because it was going to be all outside?
It was
Let's see.
not so much about the outside part. It
Mm.
was more finding what this village was going to be, as you can imagine, was a process.
Yeah.
And there's, so many ways that you can approach something like this. You can go from dead simplicity and absolute realism. I feel like we tread a fine line between that and a little bit of kind of romanticization and magic of what they could accomplish, because our showrunners feel like they want a visual distinctness and a sense of creating a culture that goes with the costumes and the incredible promise of the pilot, what was established of their torches, their costumes. In the pilot, you have that flash forward where you see this culture they developed, and Marie Schley did the costumes for that. She's a genius. So we felt the village needed to represent that same level of craftspersonship, where you've used pieces of what you have in your world.
Right.
In the costume, they've used pieces of the airplane and that sort of, natural fabrics, and
Yeah.
same feeling for the village. So we decided that everything in the village had to be salvaged from the burning cabin.
Hmm.
So in the inner narrative of the story, they had managed to salvage a few important things. There's some burnt cups, there's some tools. Also, there were things outside the cabin. There was the meat shack. There was kind of a dressing stand. So we feel like some of those didn't burn as much. So there's a few small pieces of set deck that are cabin salvage. There was also just wilderness. They had found ways with the tools that they had salvaged and through ingenuity
Yeah.
to build increasingly complex structures. We have one that Travis lives in that has kind of a
Oh, okay.
um,
Yeah.
really simple feel to it. It's more like a tree house. that in our mind was the story of the village, was that was their first shelter. And then a very interesting conversation came up about how do we show how they learn to build more complex structures. So I pitched, I have an architecture background originally, so when people wonder who the architecture nerd is in the village that has the book, it's actually me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I made
Yeah.
a pitch in a meeting, just sort of going, well, if we want to make sure that that they can sort of move into similar sort of prehistoric human structures, let's have a book that somebody is 11th or 12th grade architecture and art
Right.
class. So we we made this book for fun that kind of had structures that were very typical early human circular. They're actually quite
This
easy to make. Some of our greens people made these structures very quickly
yeah.
once you get the hang of it. And they're strong people. The Yellowjackets, they're inventive. We're like, you know what? Someone's got a book. So
Yeah.
we put this book. One of the fun things about the village was coming up with little ideas for daily dressing. Like they've used the chairs from the airplane, and they've
Right.
used books that they have left over from the cabin, from the airplane, from their luggage. So we made this little sort of book lending library outside of Murray and Akela's hut,
That's so
which was
funny.
really fun. And just to think of what books do they have, and some of them are a little burned. And then so we put the architecture book there, and then Bart, our showrunner, who was also directing the first episode, and it was so fun to work with him on that. He shot it and it made it into the
Oh.
cut. He was like, "Well, the book is in the show." We weren't necessarily expecting it to be anything beyond sort of background dressing. So it's fun when
Oh,
you have
that's great.
Easter eggs like that. I think it's right there.
The details.
Easter eggs like that that serve a sort of function to kind of describe the process of what they went through. So using the nature, using resources on Ty Van's hut there, Tyson
Yeah.
Van's hut, you can see a little bit of burnt airplane material, and they've got their like double kind of cozy chairs from the plane. Using that and what's left from the cabin, and that's it. We had to discuss every moment that we came up with discussions like, okay, they've got lanterns.
Yeah.
How did
Are
how did they maybe rescued it? Everything had to be discussed in terms of how they made it.
Well, yeah, because you have super fans and you have you want the reality of it of what could they possibly do. I really love I love that there's like a feminine feel to it though, like the circular opening of some of the teepees and then like the flowers interwoven into it and it's like girly. Like you've actually made it like in a sense like girly and what they would do. They got the time. So like why not?
That's exactly it. We thought, they're going to spend some time
Yeah.
crafting,
Yeah.
and I was in the feeling that sort of at the beginning of the season with the kind of yellow filter and the warmth of, this is the promise of partly the idea was that we had to explain that some of them may actually want to stay there. Like
Yeah.
it'll get to a point,
That's
we had a note later in the season that your life here's got to be fairly decent to want to consider even staying.
yeah.
So there was that, and then it sort of deteriorates throughout the season. But also this kind of, this kind of false warmth that then deteriorates when we get later into the season, into the snow and so on. But we wanted to be able to feel a bit pastoral and almost pretty to start. And then later at night, in episode 6, the bonfire, when the frog scientists enter the camp, it needs to
Yeah.
feel eerie and spooky. So the sort of spiky shapes and the profiles become a little witchy and
I
spooky
have this other one.
at night. If you don't know what you're walking into, it could translate from kind of homey to frightening
I-
was the plan.
And this, I mean, the night scenes too, and like how the like lighting this, that's a huge discussion of like, do
Mhm.
we have enough lights? Can they make these lights? Like, it can't all just be fire, and you want this glow, which I thought was such a great way to again make it like a nice feminine little gathering they're having here in their garb, but then giving them this soft light also, which is attainable, which I think is like so beautiful that you got that the design of it is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, our props department played. Ooh, this was one of our more tricky technical things was the paper lanterns and
Yeah.
would they really float? How are they made? And then they're made out of math textbook pages
Oh,
for
yeah.
fun. You don't really need your math textbook anymore.
Not
If you're
anymore. Not
well,
anymore. No more algebra for me.
no, no, the girls don't know anything about trigonometry or whatever the
Yeah.
phrase was in the pilot. They're just burning it and sending it up into the sky. But yeah, that was a lot. A lot of these pieces like this and the little cups that they carry that are cans that we figured were burnt from the pantry of the
Right.
cabin. that they've used, pine sap to make, I think it's pine sap. We did a bunch of research about, how do you create light? As there are a few candles that have been salvaged, but beyond that, they're on their own. Um, Lots of research about
I
what would
know.
survivalist
Isn't
research
it?
really.
Isn't it amazing? I say it all the time, the amazement of what we research for our jobs that we would never like really deep dive into if we were just regular people, like the weirdity of
Yeah.
things. And yeah, how do I survive in the wilderness? How do I make that fire last years? I mean, or a year,
Mm.
but yeah. And then you do. I mean, we all deep dive into this research and make it as realistic as we can.
And
Um,
I feel like that's the fun of it too, because I
yeah,
saw in your resume that you
yeah,
had also studied, real world architecture
yeah,
prior to going into the film industry. And that is a wonderful profession and very interesting in itself. But I do find the designing to a story that we get to do,
yeah, yeah.
to a world
Yeah,
that's not this world that
yeah,
we live in. It's its own world building is absolutely fascinating and really irreplaceable as a process.
yeah.
Once you've been in and had the opportunity to do this, it's just such a wonderful, and every day I am thankful to get to do this
Me
as
too.
a job.
It's crazy. It's really crazy because I worked in, like in an architecture firm and everything, and it was like they were designing projects that weren't going to be real for like 2, 3 years, and I was like,
Mhm.
how do you know that this pillow and this tassel is going to be relevant in 3 years? It's a real, I mean, that alone is a whole nother thing of like predicting design and everything. But I was like, you got to wait all this time to see your project. This is crazy. I think it's one of
Yeah,
those
the
things they
time
don't tell you in
frames.
college of like the real process, the real timeline of what you're doing in real world.
Well, I think that's an interesting conversation too to people that are listening to the podcast that have design backgrounds
Yeah.
but are working in other fields than film. Is I was thinking about the time frames that we accomplish
Oh,
things in
it's crazy.
compared to other, we'll build a house in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like we'll just build an actual, maybe it doesn't have the vapor barrier, but really short of that, we will build things in remarkably quick time frames in terms of ideas, development, illustrations, and reality, which is part of the fun of it, but it is very much, once you're on that conveyor belt, you're running
Yeah,
longer and
train doesn't
so
stop. Train is
no.
not stopping for anyone except for an actor. If an actor's sick, it may stop.
Yeah.
Or, fires, real devastating fires. Like,
Yeah,
then
unfortunately, yes, but short of that,
yeah, we're
it
not
is a thought,
stopping.
and so, for things like this lanterns and so on, yeah, it's a lot of very quick meetings and discussions, and, sometimes I feel like creatively, we do work well together as hive minds, but also in those timeframes, it kind of like, when you have a good show like this with great, kind showrunners and people are part of this creative hive mind, I feel like that's when a lot of
Oh,
creative
that's
inspiration strikes as well.
Did you have you had like outlines or scripts? Like how were you working like one
Yeah,
script to another? Or?
we had a pretty thorough outline from the beginning. We knew that there were certain spoilers that we don't always know, which is probably good.
Yeah.
We knew from the beginning that it was going to seem to be idyllic and then deteriorate, which is where this sort of discussion of, for instance, Ben's shelter that you have here to me was the perfect kind of mid-season shift because they had to quickly build this is and in many ways this is actually the trickiest set that we designed his shelter because I wanted it to feel like it belonged to the technology of the village, but they built it quickly. But it needed to have this kind of poignant, like feel that they were trying to make something for him that had a teeny bit of humanity to it, but
Mm,
is also kind of like apocalyptic and devastating. So I personally played with these blankets. We had, our great set deck team put it together and our greens team made it, but it was just this one thing where I really played and we ripped them and made
yeah.
them feel burnt and
Aged.
wrapped them around the post because it just needed to have this very particular hard to kind of achieve frightening yet poignant sadness to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
Because
our DP got right in there with it too.
because you're giving them this like, well, they want to take care of them, but they don't. Like there's such a uh balance from these characters of like good and evil, really.
Mm.
And showing, as you're saying, like showing the humanity through the set dressing is, and it reads very well of like, yeah, they put this together for him. They were going to keep him there. Some people really were going to keep him there.
Yeah, that each of them has, like, their own conflict. Like, he's sort of the peak of so many internal conflicts for them
Yeah.
about how far are we gonna go?
Yeah.
Are we going to kill him and eat him? Are we gonna let him go? Like, can we trust people anymore? I think it really is just the perfect mid-season
Yeah.
story stretch where he's on his trial. And we, with Jennifer Morrison, the fantastic director that directed the episode with his trial, we spoke a lot about these triangular
Yeah. The trial.
shapes too, and how the village kind of has a hierarchy that, Lottie with the circular window, she's at the peak of the village and she can kind of see everybody. Her circular window is a bit of an Easter egg because it plays forward in season 2 in
Mm.
her sharing shack at her compound.
Right.
'Cause she's kind of
Right.
like gives this sense of transparency and spirituality, but is she actually kind of watching people? And of the three sort of proposed leaders, her and Shauna and Natalie, in some ways she kind of moves the dial in a subtle way a lot. So we talked a bit about these triangular shapes and hierarchy, and that she's kind of at the head of the table, as it were, in some ways. And I found for Jennifer's episode, because they spent so much time in the village, it was a very tricky episode. And
Mm.
we have two fabulous DPs, Shasta and Michael. Shasta, they each just, it was so gratifying to see that they were enjoying the shooting the village, and we sort of learned about it as we went. But I found they shot that village really beautifully.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a lot of
to try
wides. They have a lot of
spaces.
wides in it, which is nice.
Yeah. Exactly. And
The
to and then sort of like focusing a little bit on a detail as well to kind of help the story that, in Travis's hut, say he's made sort of wind chimes out of bones and so on, just like focusing on the little details, those set deck details
Yeah.
that tell us the story of how they made it. And like you said, they have time on their hands.
Yeah.
They're gonna do some stuff to make it pretty or to do their thing.
Now, when they say to you, okay, and then all of a sudden it's winter time. Well,
Yeah.
I gotta get back to that garden, but because the garden's really pretty. But when they say, all right, now we're gonna snow blow it, you're like, okay. I
Yeah.
mean, how beautiful it looks with snow on it. You must have been very happy.
That was really fun. And of course, snow is like really incredibly challenging,
Yeah.
artificial snow.
Yeah.
It's, for those of us that
And nobody wants to
each
breathe it either. Like nobody.
no, no, I kind of, you want to, yep. And it's so many different products and methods, and really special effects department is technically kind of the ones that do it, but we're all sort of involved in trying to figure out a process. And
Yeah.
there, the realism, I would say that there's still work to be done in this world on coming up with really realistic, affordable artificial snow that, can be made within, uh, it's a lot of
Yeah.
experimentation, and there's crispiness and a reflectivity to real snow that's very hard to get with every product. And they're great teams and they're doing a really good job. It's a very tricky one. So we were super happy with what the team did here. We've learned a few things that sculpting, giving contour to the ground helps
Mhm.
it feel more real. Putting a few twigs and leaves in to kind of break it up and give it some contrast. The last thing you want is to feel it's like the powder artificial snow of like a romance movie. You
Right,
just don't want
right. Right.
so yeah, it was a lot of work, and it just worked out so well.
Oh, yeah.
We actually snowed up a huge portion of this forest outside Vancouver as well for all the running scenes. We moved
Oh,
trees around,
yeah.
so we use it a few times to get a lot of
The running.
shoe leather out of it, but this was a big snow job.
I mean, the running through all I was like, "They must have done this in winter. This is crazy." Like,
Oh, wow, that's the best thing. Nothing better than thinking that, same for our cave
oh,
set, by the way, that we built out of foam.
oh.
But nothing better than hearing that people think it's real. That's
To me,
praise.
because of the depth of the snow and, like, how far you go back, and, yeah, you can make, like, one run look like another run, but there's a lot of people running for, like, a good portion of that episode, and I was like, "Oh, they must have done this in winter, those poor actors."
We're a big user of the art. In season 2, we had to actually order artificial snow in from other parts of the country.
Oh,
We used so much on our stage, and this is, I would say, probably a football field worth of area if you add it
wow.
all
Oh,
and
wow.
plus the village. And
Yeah,
then also we did the pit as well. Yeah,
right.
it's a material, a lot of work.
I do like to some of the Instagrams had the actors just like on there. I know it's a little blurry, but it's like they were enjoying their time on set with the snow. It looks like we could probably because it
Yeah,
wasn't cold.
it's funny because it was kind of October and not really that cold,
Yeah.
but I think they're also, to be honest, enjoying being in the snow, but outside because they
Yeah.
did so much stage work, which there was a certain kind of interest to having the stage in season two as well for that feeling of like claustrophobia and being trapped in winter in a cabin. But I feel like they really enjoyed being outside in the wilderness this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, it's such a I mean, how different 3 seasons can be with the design of it is fantastic. And the opportunity to like progress this storyline through their design and how they're evolving in their environment is really great. It's a really great like just design wise. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a real joy. I feel like there's one designer for the pilot, and then a different designer for season one, and then me. And then previous two designers were amazing and did
Yeah.
wonderful jobs. And it was really, I always wanted to honor their work as well while
Yeah.
we created also new, a show like this. Again, one of the joys of shows like this is that you're still reinventing the show every season. So for season
Yeah.
three, you're not just going into and like we barely shot in any of the standing sets in season three. The Sadeki house, Thaisa's townhouse. We
Right.
weren't in there very much. We really were out in the world
Yeah.
between this and then some of the new other worlds that we created as well, like the hotels and Aussie's ice cream. And we just very much a road show, very each episode so much new, new to consider.
I know. I mean, I don't have that many slides of the modern or the present day sets, but I can tell like this. I mean, this big hotel room that you did, and
Yeah.
is the bar that they go to? Is that a set or a location?
It's a
Um,
location, and
it
that
is.
one actually is a repeat of a bar that they shot in season one. It's in
Okay.
Vancouver. Great bar, really great, bones to it, lots of texture.
Yeah,
Uh, that is real.
that's a
And
lot.
again, sometimes when you're doing, just a day of shooting, as you know, the frequently you'll go to a location. We did consider for the other sets, like the hotel, the kind of luxury hotel, and another hotel we did called the Jolly Hitcher, which was meant
Mhm.
to be more a 90s throwback New Jersey hotel.
Yeah.
We did consider those as locations, but ultimately we ended up building both of those as sets for the same episode. And that was really fun. Two extremely different, it
Oh
couldn't
yeah.
get more different
When
hotels for the same
when I saw
episode.
this come up, I'm like, oh my God, everyone was like, whew, we get to do a like high-end hotel suite with white and gold. Everybody just dive in because you're so
It was so much
dirty
fun.
all the
And
time.
again, our brave DP, so Shasta, when I was talking to her originally, we talked about maybe, doing more of a wood sort of darker toned hotel, but that tread on what we did in for Lottie's penthouse in five. And also we just decided let's just go white. Let's just
Yeah.
go
Oh
super
yeah.
like just
'Cause-
lush and cozy. So and it set it in such stark contrast to the Jolly Hitcher as well, which is kind of
yeah.
like with walls and it's kind of yellow and faded wallpaper.
There's something too within the story, like it's something pure, like it's white, it's new, it's we're relaxed, we're trying to relax here. They can't get a relaxation day for their lives, but I mean, they are
Poor Misty
trying.
shows up.
Yeah, they're trying.
That's so true. And again, it's a little poignant in a way because I think that the show does that. It kind of breaks your heart while giving you something,
Yeah,
beautiful, but also trying to, because of course it's for Van, right? Like Thais is trying to give Van this amazing, relaxing experience,
yeah.
but, it will unravel being Yellow Jackets.
What character do you like to design for the modern day?
Hmm. Actually, I would have to go with Shauna.
Mm,
I think Shauna's house from season one set the tone that she's a little messy. Like she's got a lot of layers and she's trying to set up a certain facade, but she's also kind of unraveling. So I really enjoy in season two, we did this chop shop where she's going to get her van back.
right, yeah.
Like unraveled and messy. It's just kind of a fascinating character. I mean, all the characters, to be honest. We also, I couldn't really pick one because they're all so interesting, and we always think about their inner narrative and how that projects onto not only the world they would make, but the world that we see through their eyes. For instance, Melissa was very interesting this season because she's a fake person. She's not even
Right,
herself.
right.
Her house, we made this very white, simple, kind of over decorated house where you can see that she's kind of curating her life. Like even her kids' drawings are a little perfect and
Mhm.
everything's a little perfect. She's got the sign that there's a blank spot on the wall. We're like, let's put the kitchen is the heart of the
Yeah.
family over
Yeah.
that because of the tyranny, because of the heart, but also because she's pretending
Yeah.
that she's sort of fake, right? These are all just like performative gestures on her part. That was really fun too.
I liked Callie's room. I forget if we saw that before. I mean, maybe we did, but it was, I feel like,
We did, yeah. It was a season one, and I like it too because it's almost like I have two daughters, and they outgrow their rooms really quickly.
yeah.
Like her room still felt like the room that had been put there for her when she was 12.
Yeah. And I think with all the throwbacks and everything and how like things come around again, I sort of
Mhm.
felt that in her room of like, oh, look at how these trends come around again and like through generations and especially like when you think about like their rooms before they got in the crash in
Yeah.
season 1 that was fun and I felt like in in this season I think every season but I think in every season the ability for you guys to throw back so well to
Mhm.
either like when they were young or like the modern day or like when they're here and threading them all together in design is really nice.
Yeah, I think the two timelines give us it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of the things from the mid to late 90s are actually very trendy right now,
Yeah.
fashion
I
wise and
know.
style wise in some ways as well. So it's kind of interesting to look back. And when you do the research on the 90s, a lot of it's dated, but a lot of it really isn't as well. The world has changed a lot in terms of electronics and
Yeah.
fabrics, but there's also certain sort of style choices that it's always very tricky to do the 90s.
It
For
is.
instance, the Jolly Hitcher, it's a modern hotel, but our showrunners had some hotels they were fond of in New Jersey from the 90s.
Mhm.
And so we did some research to try to remember, the kind of pattern on pattern and floral and certain things that like sort of set it as being a little lost in time,
Yeah,
you know?
90s
Look
are
back.
hard. I've done that. It's hard. It's hard to capture because there was actually so many things going on. Like they
Yeah.
you could do the starkness, you could do the the patterns and I don't know, there was so much going on in the 90s. It's hard to nail that style down without it looking 80s or, too far back. But
I
yeah,
agree with you. I actually
yeah.
think that's a larger conversation. The 90s did have a lot of intersections of styles. And I think today is a bit like that too. So when we try really hard to find specific pieces that could only be 90s
Yeah.
to help anchor it.
Yeah.
Certain things that like certain types of ruffle curtains and things that people just wouldn't do now,
Right.
like a ruffled valance, that sort of thing, just to kind of make sure that it's anchored
Yeah.
in that time frame. And also, we're such thrifters now.
Yeah.
I just love thrifting. Like they'll just
Eclectic.
wear stuff from every decade. So it is, I feel like, a really interesting challenge to make sure it does when we're doing a 90s set, like the 90s classroom. Really be careful to make sure things are rooted in what could have been possible then and what would be there then.
What do you how did the intertwining with costumes through this? Because I know, you're making everything, but like this scene with them, with
Mhm.
all of the greenery around them and everything. Is there, I'm sure, a lot of interaction between costumes and yourself, but is it like, hey, they wouldn't have that many of this for you to like they wouldn't have these like we all have to share the reality kind of what they had on the plane. Like I
Mhm.
always feel like that, like lending to each other through during the different thing or props or everything, like the bigger discussion of that.
Yeah, that was a really interesting. I mean, Marie is just the most fabulous costume designer, and she's such a thinker and a deep thinker as well. So she, of course, I think her costumes in the pilot were a large part of the visual excitement that the show established
Mm,
in from the outset. It was like, oh my, wow, those are wild. And she was really thoughtful about combining things like sports jerseys and furs and,
right.
you know, balls from the airplane seatbelts and, just really thought it through. And then the hair, I'm not sure if that was her pitch originally, but I feel like she established this fascinating cultural endpoint, in the flash forward in the pilot that we were early on. So we had a fabulous different costume designer in season two. So Marie was new to me for season three,
Hmm.
and early on we had a fantastic conversation about culture and where were they going to get to. And I feel we were intrinsically intertwined for this season in terms of what you mentioned, which is kind of like the scale and the volume of pieces that they could have used from the plane. For instance, she's those capes that you showed in the ceremony where they let the lanterns go.
Right.
Those are made from the seat of the plane, leather sort of turned inside out.
Mm.
She and you can see and there's some animal, is it sort of different pieces that they could have found or used or cannibalized, as it were, from the plane. We did think about that. And when we went back to the plane later in the season, we made sure that we showed that the seats had been ripped apart and that they had taken, every piece that we established in the town, like the wires that were used to tie some of the twigs together. We
Right.
made sure when we went back to the plane that you showed the wires had been pulled out and the panels had been pulled off and the seats had been cannibalized, as it were, which is fun in the
I got that.
service of making a spooky atmosphere, but also that kind of realism of scale of what you can accomplish. So we did talk a lot with costumes and props and make the real goal and challenge was to make sure that we had a culture that they had been resourceful and scavenging and using pieces they found and creating pieces, but we never wanted to have more than they could have actually had. So there were some
Right.
comments about, okay, so we've got a couple candles on set here. We can't have this many because I feel like they couldn't have salvaged that many. There was definitely some deep conversations among all of our artistic departments and our showrunners and writers and directors about all of that.
Yeah, and I think you guys nail it. Like, I don't ever think like that's unrealistic. I think that with the timing that they've been there and the resources that they have, it all looks achievable. Like, I mean, it's a lot
Oh,
of
thank
work,
you.
but
That's good to
it's a
hear.
lot of work, but I think that they could do it. Like these girls are pretty headstrong. I think that just the
Well,
character
yeah,
driven, yeah.
they're determined, and that's good to hear because I do feel that there was moments where I was like, it's quite stark. Like the village really doesn't have a lot of smalls,
Mm,
decorations. Fairly, but there's like, oh, that's just the way it's going to be. Every
yeah.
piece needs to be precious.
Yeah. I mean, as a decorator, like you're talking about like technology and everything before, like look at our desk dressing now. You have like
Hmm.
you usually have a laptop. You don't have you don't have phones anymore, really. But people don't
Hmm.
even have phones. There's no paperwork. So it's
Yeah.
like a lamp and like some maybe some judges. Maybe you still have, why do you even have tape? Like I questioned that the other day, but I'm like, why do we have tape? Why do I have a
Yep.
tape dispenser anymore? Nobody's taping shit. Like,
Nope.
but it looks pretty. But desk dressing to me has just gone down so much, especially when you're doing something a little modern. It's like, oh, put a
That's a good point.
rock. Let's put a rock on here and like a
Are people
table.
stapling anymore? Like there
No.
is that is true, and that's one good kind of example of what does distinguish the 90s from now is they
Yeah.
had a lot of paraphernalia.
Yeah.
They had payphones still,
You
they
still
had
had Rolodex.
things
You still,
literal.
you
Yeah,
still have that going on. So
yeah,
when I
address
see,
books.
yeah, so when I see like I have it I don't know. I have it somewhere. Like there's a table with some dressing on it. I think it's like over here in the
Mhm.
camp. It's like, well, that's
Yep,
their salvage just table. Like that's all they got. Like this is it.
yep,
Like it's like
that's it. That's, I think, their candle making table that we
right.
the biggest fun really on the village was thinking about what do they do day by day? Okay, so we had an area where they're like,
Right.
they're utilizing, actually, speaking of costumes, there was this fabulous detail that um, Marie did on Van's jacket that's got the leather on top from the airplane seats, and then it has these like tassels of fabric in multicolors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really kind of fun and textured. So we later in the season when Misty was, we had this kind of shift where we went from summer to early fall and we added blankets to the doorways. And, Akila's blanket, she'd sort of drawn some flowers on it
Mm-hmm.
and they found ways to decorate and make their space their own. And so Misty had these kinds of fabrics, which I found shot really beautifully. The scene where they reshot her sort of like smile towards the end of the season,
Yeah.
standing back towards that
Psycho.
set background. It's such a beautiful texture and material. But that definitely was from Marie's costume, where we're like, they're going to use the same techniques to create the soft fabrics to keep themselves warm in the winter, and their doorways need
Right.
to tie into what they're doing with their clothes as well. Like you could literally see someone, you hang up a blanket in your doorway and then you wear it the next day
Yeah.
and put the belt around yourself from the
You have to
airplane to
multi-use everything. I mean, you have to find
Mhm.
uses for things and multi-use everything for the seasons
Yeah.
and everything. How big was your greens budget? No. mean,
I don't even know. I'd be scared to
yeah.
our greens. I really full kudos. I mean,
I mean,
full
you had a
kudos to
whole
our
little
greens department.
farm there too this season, which was great. A little, they started
Oh,
growing
yeah.
things and chickens and
Yeah,
goats.
we had so much greens, and to the point where the location we were, greens was also involved in like creating areas for the set. And then originally we had a bunch of scouts for where to put the village. Originally there was this kind of like circular opening in the trees, and we're like, man, it could be there, but it wasn't as like exciting. And then we found this location that just down the hill and kind of awkward to get to. But luckily, we had brave producers who were willing to say, oh, you know, it's going to be a slightly tricky cart roll, but we'll get used to it. And we built kind of a little gravel road, and we built a bridge to get to it. So these all involved the greens department. And then we just bushwhacked this site that was filled with brambles, kind of like
Wow.
4 feet. So you just sort of stood there and you tried to imagine it. But what was amazing was a little peninsula with a stream that runs around it. Just the
Oh,
perfect size to create a not too big village that had a kind of centrality, because we knew we wanted it to be a circle with the fire pit in the
mhm.
center. You know, the kitchen is your meeting place. And it was amazing. But our greens department, they were just, it was a huge show. Like
It's
everything in
huge.
this village is, you know,
Yeah.
our conversations about you can't, you know, let's not cut the twig, you need to
Yeah.
break it on your knee. And they have some axes, but you know, there's only one, you know, like all these conversations about how did they make it, which was definitely exploratory.
When and making it look lived in, like, look, this is the path that runs, and like, there's still some grass around, but they're walking around this place all the time, and there's mud and grass growth around the
Mhm.
huts to show that they've been there a little bit through a season. And no, it's really kudos to the greens department on this too, because that's a big job. It's a
It's a
big,
big job. And I would say what you mentioned about the, you know, the mud and so on, that was a real challenge. And keeping the kind of, because we had to kind of raise the landscape and then put the village in, my one concern was always making sure it didn't feel too blank.
mm,
So we put tufts of grass in and tried to make it grow, but like leave pathways where they would have been walking.
yeah.
That was difficult. You know, I think if I had one thing that I found to be the tricky thing that when I would go to set early would be just making sure that it didn't feel like just blank and brown, like get some leaves in there, get some, so there was some texture to the floor of the
Yeah.
village, as it were. And then nature took over
I mean,
where we were working, you know,
did you come
just the
in
huts.
almost every morning? There was like morning dew on everything, or like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's beautiful. There's like it's just like lovely sitting there sometimes. Just to go there early and find a
Oh,
stump to sit on and just like, you know, see the sun come up is absolutely stunning. And nature really did take over too. We just kind of, you know, planted the seed, as it were, and let it go because we put some grass seeds in and they
mm,
grew. But the what we didn't expect in a kind of freaky Logan's Runway is I always thought like these apocalypse movies where, you know, people left the city for 10 years and it's completely overgrown with vines.
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, that's a little bit of the lean in because it looks cool. But actually, those huts, like grass grew, like everything grew
really?
so much in one season. Like the grass was like 3 feet high in places, and
Wow.
the huts completely grew over. And you know, without tending, nature really takes over really quickly. And we just let it go. We just like
Yeah.
we're just the realism. We're like, oh, let's just see what happens. You know, whatever it is, it's gonna be good.
Oh, that's
So
great. Now, do you have do you have these standing sets, or did you just take everything down?
no, no, so we're it's still standing.
Oh, that's good.
I assume I'm allowed to say that. I don't know. If
Wait
I'm
till
not,
I
I'm
mean,
gonna say it on the podcast. But
I
yeah.
can't wait to see, like, like, or for
I
you to
think
see what the
I'm
growth
kind
is when you go back. I mean,
Yeah, that's a fingers crossed. There's has not been an official pickup yet, but I think we're all hoping, and we all love our show and love the story. So we'd
well,
love to go back. And I miss the village. Like it really does feel. You start to get very attached to these
yeah,
places. You know, when you
yeah.
work on them, and it's so amazing to see the cast come in and make it their own. And yeah, I just kind of miss just going there and opening set and doing whatever we're doing for the day there.
I mean, I hope it's I don't think that was the ending, but I because I'm a fan, but where would you like to see this evolve to? Or like, what are there things for you that you would like to design for these characters?
I would love to see something that I think I can say because the showrunners have mentioned it in interviews. I know nothing, like this is not insider intel, but I would love to see. I would love to see what happened when they come back. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, they're their bedrooms in the 90s. I would love to see what happens when you're just a kid, just going on a plane to go to, a soccer tournament, and then you come home 2 plus years later, is it
And
19 months? Trying to remember exactly how long they're out there, but you come back and you're a completely different person. You're
yeah.
different and you're
How many of the
kind of
parents like kept the rooms and which parents
yeah,
didn't? Like
yeah.
that's an even harder blow of like they turned it into an office. They like but
Oh, yeah.
understandable they thought I was dead. I don't know. That's either way it's like crazy.
Well, I
But
think that's
yeah.
the interesting scene when they circle Hannah when they've got her tied up in the double airplane chair and they're like, "Are people still looking for us?" And
Yeah.
she's like, "No." And that's a
Yeah.
sad moment for them
Yeah.
to realize like life kind of has moved forward. So it's like they're the people that have gone in a time capsule or coming back to a world that makes you can't
Yeah.
step back into where you were when you just left. Things have changed. And there's so many things about the way societies run that I think wouldn't make sense to them anymore, that they would just cut to the chase. Like they just wouldn't
Yeah.
feel, like you're gonna come back and worry about styles.
Yeah.
Like you're
Yeah.
gonna worry what color is it trendy this year? Who are they when they come back and how has each one been affected by their trauma there and the lies that they're holding inside themselves? I think that'd be super interesting to explore that.
I think the casting on the show is fantastic on both on the young and the older age.
Yeah.
I just think it's fantastic. I love Christina Ricci and I love Juliette Lewis. I think that's fantastic. Did you know who the queen was? Like did
No, actually, I did
no.
not. Although I
Be-
think it's sometimes those sort of interesting stories where there's breadcrumbs left and you don't see the path when you're walking on it, but you look back and you're like, of course I should have seen that. I
yeah.
mean, really fascinating conversation I had with Bart and Ashley and Jonathan at the beginning of the season was about getting to the pit at the end. We
Hmm.
knew we were going to get to the pit at the end in this iconic scene. We also were not on Mammoth Mountain. We're on a relatively flat forest in Vancouver, BC, and we knew it was going to likely be artificial snow. So this, of course, is a somewhat interesting challenge to think, okay, we're going to try to recreate bits of something that was filmed in real snow in winter in a mountain. And we're not that. So we knew that we were going to be dovetailing into the pilot. Um, but an interesting conversation was to do with Shauna and her diary and a sense of this was something more that I was asking, but are we recreating exactly what we saw in the pilot, or are we
Creating
creating a version of
her
it? And in a
version.
funny
Yeah.
way, we did. We were creating kind of a larger, more objective focus versus the conversation was that, as Sean I think mentions in episode 10 in season 3, like what are real stories? Like how does our memory distort it? Why is it so hard to remember?
Yeah.
And that is your memory is like that. I was
Yeah.
reading a little bit about memory recently that our memory is like we
Shit.
remember the last time we remembered it, not the actual thing. It's like
Our
a game of
memory,
telephone
yeah.
with yourself,
Our
you
memory
know?
shit, really. It's like
Yeah.
photograph. I think one thing in modern day sidebar that will help us with memory is all the pictures we take now. I think
It's
that
so crazy, isn't it, that you
yeah,
remember, like, the picture
yeah,
more than you remember being in the moment.
yeah,
So it's like the diary and these kinds of, like their memories are filtered through what they wanna remember, what they don't wanna remember, and this kind of, like, sort of almost simplification that happens with memory sometimes. You just go
yeah,
right to the main point, you forget all this stuff. So I think that was obviously music to my ears too, because we're never going to be able to recreate the exact. We did bring
right,
in trees of the same species, and we were so careful and tried very hard. But of course, like I said, we're in Vancouver. We're using artificial snow. We're not on a mountain in winter. So full kudos to the team. But it was, intersected
yeah, look great.
very amazingly with the editing as well.
Yeah,
But that feeling of I think it'd be interesting to continue to explore in the show
yeah,
what you chose to remember versus the reality and how is that affecting you now as well. As like with Melissa, I think Melissa's been trying to, I think, create some sort of curated perfect life, but now that's all ripped apart.
right.
So interesting to see things continue to kind of get ripped apart.
It's such a great like story because you have two versions of this life that they led, like this outdoor life and their modern life. And getting
Mhm.
to design for both of them is really and decorate. I'm sure your decorators thrilled too to be able to like develop these characters younger and older. Like
Mhm.
it's that's something like sometimes you do a flashback or whatever, but when you have a whole series of developing characters at different ages, that's amazing. That's
Yeah,
to
I think
me
it
it
is.
is.
We have
That's fun.
super talented decorators. Ida Foyle for season 3 and Mark Lane did season 2. Both amazing, very thoughtful decorators. I think these
Mhm.
types of shows, like we were speaking about earlier, just they appeal to someone who really wants to do the research and wants to think about it. And then add the extra thing you didn't expect. What I've loved about these types of projects is, they're never one note. There's so
Right.
many layers going on at once. Misty's bedroom, for instance, that we did in season 3.
Hmm.
Misty's an interesting and complex character, you know?
Misty's
So what
great.
costumes does she have? Isn't she great? Oh, I love Misty. I have a Misty Funko Pop. I
Yeah.
also have a Coach Band Funko Pop, which Steven Kruger
That's
signed for
awesome.
his air
Oh my God.
quotes, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
Two of
That's
my
cool.
favorite characters.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's great.
No favorites, but highlights.
Yeah. I always have a favorite character, I feel like, because I don't know, either you relate to them or you hate them or you're like interested in their story more. I think you always pick a favorite. At least I
I think
do.
there's a character too, like for when Coach Ben, oh, so sorry about his demise.
Yeah, really.
He was kind of the person who was still the outsider, kind of like our eyes, interpreting their behavior and
Right.
let us know like, the degree to which the needle was shifting. And when he's gone, they sort of that goes from the
Yeah.
story. Yeah.
Could never have imagined how this season would have gone, and I think the design of it really pushes the story forward and showing how determined they are to make it work there. Like, and when they say
Yeah.
like you're
That's
not
why the
going
artist really
anywhere,
likes it.
that's pretty
Yeah.
much like, yeah, you don't have to leave. Like you can stay. We can stay here, which is crazy, but they
That's the
believe
thing
it.
is like once you leave the plane and once you leave the cabin, these are all steps of making it more your own. You go from like the plane, which is the like you'll stay there for a few days, nobody shows up. You
Yeah.
go to the cabin, which is inhabiting another space, but then that kind of gets burned down, which is like the carpet, the rug being
Yeah.
pulled out from underneath them and forcing them to kind of mature into being people who are going to live and survive in the wilderness. So then, yeah, this town, like I mean, the village that they make, they could potentially be where they live the rest of their lives. So it changes the narrative to making it your own, taking the key notes from the costumes where they've just made it their own. Like
Yeah.
they're into their own culture now. They have their own visual language. There's meaning to what they're doing.
Where
You
did you
know.
shoot the last shot when she's up on the cliff?
Oh, that was actually in a mountain in Vancouver.
Mm, so
Very
beautiful.
small crew went up in a helicopter for that. I love that scene.
It's
The
really
music,
beautiful.
the needle drop is so appropriate
The
too.
music, everything,
Um,
it's perfect.
yeah,
And the
and not only
determination to get up
too.
there and like make that call. Like it's
Yeah,
such a great
it is real, which is great. We had those conversations you have about. I do respect and appreciate that the show will lean into the real and the scope as much as possible. So the conversations happen that do happen about do you want to shoot it green screen or blue screen? Do you
right.
want to do a little set? And we went through all those, but ultimately, the only way to do it is to pick your battles and make it as real as possible for such important scenes like that.
Yeah.
Because they got the scale and the scope and the realism. And yeah, go Natalie,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
hero.
Poor Natalie. Well, thank you. I've taken up a beautiful hour of your Sunday, but thank you so much. I love the work. I hope it gets recognized because it's a lot of work. Shooting outside the whole time and
Yeah.
how long did you shoot? How long are your episodes?
The episodes are 12 days,
12
but there's
days.
some overlap.
Oh, yeah.
One nice thing about the show, I think, for the ADs is that the two timelines are separate, which helps them a bit to keep
Oh, nice.
the scheduling of the actors. So 12 days, but maybe a couple of overlap days depending on the episode. So maybe 10
Nice.
linearly.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's a good time. It doesn't seem too compact, which is like what I feel like a lot of people are running into, myself included. Like, oh, get it
Yeah,
down,
we
smaller.
we we do good support and resources to try to lean in and make the show as carefully as possible to craft the
Yeah.
show. Just a fantastic team too. I just want to give kudos to everyone that worked in our in our prep departments. Prep is often,
Yeah.
I'm so glad to see more narrative and conversation about prep too. It's such a huge part of
It's
filmmaking,
my
and we don't
favorite
always
part.
know. Yeah, there's so much like passion, and people throw so much of themselves. I mean, I feel like every single person, as you know, every single person is important to the creation of the
Yep.
show, and everyone has amazing ideas. So it's nice to see that be honored as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
You know.
A lot of spokes in the wheel. A lot of,
Hmm.
we can't, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you can't
Exactly.
do it without props. You can't do it without, cost. We all work together to bring this all to screen. It's an amazing thing, really, that we all can work together and like get it there. It is a
It really
crazy
is.
thing.
It's really quite an amazing process, and it's so true. Like your onsets are sort of, in line of defense, like your onset
Yeah.
props and set deck and so on. Frequently, they'll have to. The more that we know what our goals are and understand the creative path of the show too, which is all about communication. And so we were very lucky. We had just a fabulous team
Oh,
on
that's
projects in that regard. So just
awesome.
great to meet you too.
Yeah, so
Thank
great to
you so
meet
much.
you.
It's been a pleasure.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm so glad to have gotten to spoken to you about the project because I like it. I love it. I love the story.
Me
So
too.
I'm looking forward. I bet there better be a next season because I can't go out like that. I need a little bit
I
more.
sincerely hope so. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need a little more. So good luck. Fingers crossed. Thanks again so much for Margot joining me on the podcast and sharing so many amazing insights into this Yellowjackets journey. And I hope it continues. I'm ready. Ready. I just love talking to people and how they create such layered and textured and emotional, beautiful sets. I love it. I'm so thankful that people talk about it. And again, if you want to see what we're talking about, check out the YouTube video and you can see her beautiful sets. If you are loving these episodes, which I know you are, please take a second to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's obsessed with production design, just like you are. And of course, next week, what do I have next week? Let me just bring it up here while we're talking. Next week is Hacks, possibly the studio. We haven't been able to get it together. If not, maybe a little something else for you. You never know. So I hope you enjoyed. I'm Kim Wannop for Decorating Pages, and I hope you got an earful.